Hi everyone, my name is Ffion Jones and I'm a trainee counsellor studying the MSc in Counselling at Bangor University. And today I'll be presenting my dissertation exploring resilience among trainee counsellors in the United Kingdom, specifically whether age and perceived social support has a relationship with resilience. I chose this topic because counsellor training can be deeply rewarding, but it can also be emotionally, academically, and personally demanding. Trainees are often balancing coursework, placements, client responsibility, reflective development, finances, employment, and family life, sometimes all at once. Previous research has highlighted the emotional demands of counsellor training, including workload pressures, self-doubt, and fear of failure, particularly within counselling psychology trainees. So understanding what helps trainees remain resilient feels highly relevant, both for trainee wellbeing and longer-term professional sustainability. As I go through the presentation, it may be useful to keep one question in mind. What actually helps someone cope well in demanding environments? Is it the experience gained by age? Is it support, experiences, personality, or something more complex? Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to thank the people who supported this project. Firstly, Professor Ffion and Dr. Susie Clarkson for their guidance, encouragement, and support throughout the dissertation process. I'd also like to acknowledge the other members of my research group, Emma, Heikel, Craig, and Holly. I've enjoyed every second of working with you and sharing ideas throughout the process. And finally, I'd like to thank all of the trainee counsellors who took the time to participate in the study and share their experiences, because without that, this research simply wouldn't have been possible. Resilience is commonly described as the ability to recover, adapt, or maintain functioning during challenge or adversity. Earlier perspectives often viewed resilience as a relatively fixed personality trait, but more recent literature increasingly understands it as a dynamic process shaped by interactions between individuals and their environments. In helping professions, resilience is especially important because the work often involves emotional labour, uncertainty, and responsibility for others. Scov Holt and Trotter Matson discussed how practitioners regularly work alongside stress, relational complexity, and emotional pressure, which can contribute to burnout if not managed sustainably. For trainee counsellors, this can begin before qualification. They may be learning skills while working with real clients, receiving feedback, navigating self-doubt, and managing academic expectations. Counselling training is also unusual because personal development is not separate from professional development. Trainees are often asked to reflect on their own emotional responses, relational patterns, and vulnerabilities while simultaneously learning clinical skills. That can make the process particularly emotionally exposing at times. Previous research with trainee counselling psychologists found stress linked to placements, workload, and professional development demands. So resilience may be an important protective factor during training. Perhaps think for a moment about a challenging learning experience you've had yourself. What helped you continue? Was it external support, inner coping skills, confidence, or simply getting through one day at a time? One factor commonly explored in resilience research is age. Some studies suggest older adults may report higher resilience because they have broader life experience, more established coping strategies, and stronger emotional regulation. Research with mature learners in professional training has similarly suggested that older students may draw upon previous life experience when responding to academic and placement pressures. This would make intuitive sense. More years lived may mean more challenges navigated. However, findings are mixed. Some studies found no clear relationship between age and resilience, and others found younger adults scoring similarly or even higher. So age may not be a straightforward predictor. Many of us probably hold assumptions here without fully realising it. When you imagine a resilient trainee, who do you picture? Someone older and experienced, or someone younger, adaptable and flexible? That uncertainty within the literature was one reason I wanted to explore age specifically within trainee counsellors. A second factor frequently linked to resilience is social support. This refers to the help people feel available to them, emotionally, practically, or relationally. Importantly, the literature often emphasises perceived social support rather than simply the amount of support available, meaning whether individuals believe support is there when needed. Research across student and helping profession populations has often linked higher social support with stronger well-being and resilience. Research with nursing students, for example, found higher social support was associated with greater resilience and lower psychological distress. So it's reasonable to expect that trainees who felt supported would also feel more resilient. It's interesting to think about this in our own lives as well. During stressful times, how helpful is it to you to have people around for help? So the aim of this study was to explore whether age and perceived social support had a relationship with the resilience levels among trainee counsellors in the UK. This area remains relatively under-researched within counselling populations, particularly within the UK trainee counsellors specifically. Based on previous literature, I tested two hypotheses. A significant positive relationship between age and resilience was expected, and a significant positive relationship between perceived social support and resilience was expected. The study used a quantitative cross-sectional survey design. Participants were trainee counsellors in the UK studying at level 4 or above. An opportunity sampling approach was used with recruitment through social media, professional networks, training providers and Bangor University's SONA participation system. Following data cleaning, the final sample consisted of 49 participants aged between 19 and 62. Resilience was measured using the brief resilience scale developed by Smith and colleagues, which focuses specifically on the ability to recover or bounce back from stress. Participants responded to statements such as, "I tend to bounce back quickly after hard times." Perceived social support was then measured using the multidimensional scale of perceived social support developed by Simmet and colleagues, covering support from family, friends, and significant others. An example item from this scale was, "My friends really tried to help me." So the Spearman correlation was then used to examine relationships between these variables. The key finding was that neither hypothesis was supported. First, there was no significant relationship between age and resilience. And second, there was no significant relationship between perceived social support and resilience. In practical terms, being older did not automatically mean feeling more resilient, and feeling generally supported did not necessarily predict resilience either. Interestingly, the sample reported relatively good levels of perceived support overall, yet this still did not relate strongly to resilience. When I first analysed the data, I expected at least some relationship to emerge, particularly with perceived social support, because previous literature often links support with coping and well-being. But when looking at the scatter plots, there simply wasn't a clear pattern. Resilience scores remained fairly spread across different ages and across different levels of support. So although participants generally reported feeling supported, this did not necessarily translate into feeling more able to recover from stress or setbacks. That became one of the most interesting parts of the study for me, because it raised questions about whether resilience is more context specific than we sometimes assume. One explanation could be that age itself may be too broad of a variable. So age does not automatically equal coping skills, emotional flexibility, or reflective capacity. Some younger trainees may already have substantial life experiences through adversity, caring roles, or previous careers. Likewise, some older trainees may face additional pressures such as family responsibilities, finances, or career transition stress. So, chronological age may tell us less than we originally assumed. It may also be that counsellor training creates a fairly shared developmental experience regardless of age. So whether someone enters training at 22 or 52, they may still encounter similar emotional challenges. So uncertainty, vulnerability, receiving feedback, that placement anxiety, and that professional self-doubt. So the immediate experience of training itself may become more influential than chronological age. This aligns with literature suggesting resilience may be shaped less by age itself and more by factors associated with age, such as coping style, personality, or previous experiences. Similarly, general support may not be the most relevant type of support. So a trainee may feel loved and supported by family, yet still feel alone in placement anxiety or professional self-doubt. Whereas support from peers, tutors, supervisors, or therapists may feel more psychologically useful because they understand the training context they're in. Research with trainee therapists has similarly suggested that resilience may be strengthened through feeling understood within that training relationship. So support quality and relevance may matter more than that support quantity. For example, talking through a difficult placement experience with another trainee who understands that environment may feel psychologically different from talking to a loved one outside of the profession. The relationship outside training may be emotionally close, but the peer relationship may provide something different, such as validation, shared understanding, or normalization of the experience. One thing these findings made me think about was whether we sometimes mistake confidence, age, or social networks as signs of resilience, and these findings suggest we should be cautious about making those assumptions. So these findings may have useful implications for counselling training programmes. One important point may be avoiding assumptions about who is likely to cope well based on age, confidence, or life stage alone. The findings perhaps suggest that resilience develops differently across individuals and may be shaped by a range of personal and environmental factors. Although my study did not directly examine training environments, previous literature has highlighted the importance of supportive and reflective learning cultures in developing resilience within helping professions. So, for example, McAllister and McKinnon argued that resilience may be strengthened through reflective opportunities, supportive educational environments, and the development of adaptive coping skills. Similarly, Cleary and colleagues found evidence that resilience in health professions, which were nurses, may be enhanced through organisational support and targeted interventions. So research specifically with trainee therapists has also suggested that resilience can develop through supervision, reflection, and feeling understood within training relationships. So resilience may be better understood not simply as an individual trait, but as something shaped through interactions between trainees and the wider learning environments. There may also be an important message here for trainees themselves. So struggling at points during training may not mean someone is unsuited for the counselling profession. It may instead reflect the emotional and developmental demands of learning this work. The study also had limitations. The final sample size was relatively small, which may have reduced power to detect subtle relationships. The design was cross-sectional, meaning it captured only one moment in time. Resilience may fluctuate across training depending on placements, confidence, workload, or life circumstances. And the support measure focused on general support rather than training-specific support. So future research could therefore explore supervision quality, peer belonging, help-seeking confidence, placement experiences, that kind of resilience over time. And I think a mixed method approach could be especially valuable here because questionnaires can show patterns, but they may not fully capture how trainee counsellors actually experience resilience in day-to-day training. For example, interviews or reflective diaries could explore how trainees make sense of self-doubt, supervision, placement stress, or moments of growth in ways that numerical measures alone may miss. This may be particularly valuable within counselling, where subjective experience, reflection, and relational processes are essential to professional development. So to conclude, my findings suggest resilience in trainee counsellors may not be explained simply by age or general support levels. Instead, resilience may be better understood as a developing process shaped by reflection, coping, meaningful relationships, and the training environment. This also reflects wider resilience literature, which increasingly understands resilience as dynamic and context dependent, rather than a fixed trait people either possess or lack. So perhaps the key question is not who is naturally resilient, but instead, how do we create environments where resilience can grow? Thank you very much for listening. And here I've included a reference list for the research discussed throughout the presentation. If there are any sources you'd like to look at in more detail, please feel free to pause the recording here.